Hi guys, Kim here. Welcome to Backyard Blooms. Today we're going to talk about hydrangeas, and we're going to talk about the most commonly asked question is, what time of the year do I prune my hydrangeas? So when you're planting plants, make sure you keep your plant tags. Right here I have a mountain hydrangea tag, and I also have the little lime tag. Here in my garden I have the little lime hydrangeas. The important thing to know is what type of hydrangea that you have. There is 4 main type of hydrangeas that I'm going to talk about later in this video, but when you look on the back of your plant tag, it will tell you what time to prune. And this time for my little lime hydrangea says late winter, early spring. So right now is definitely late winter, so it's definitely time, if I choose to, that I can prune my hydrangeas, or I can wait until I see those little tiny buds appear in early spring. So another important thing to know is what type of hydrangea that you have, but if it grows on new wood or old wood. And I actually thought, and I'm a little bit disappointed, I thought this plant tag would tell you that, but it does not. So panicle hydrangeas grow on new wood. That's why it's okay to go ahead and prune them in late winter, early spring. Now, if you have a mop type hydrangea, then you do not want to trim those right now, because mop head hydrangeas only grow on old wood. So when I relate to the mop head type hydrangeas, I relate to color. So mop heads usually have that purple and pink hues, and if you have that type of hydrangea, and you can also tell by the leaf, then you're going to know that that hydrangea grows on old wood. And they're really the only type of hydrangea that you really have to be really careful about when you prune. So if you prune right now in winter or early spring, you're going to cut all your blooms off, and you certainly don't want to do that. So if you have that type of hydrangea, the only time you prune those is when after they bloom in early spring or in the summertime. And then after those spent blooms come off, then you can either take the spent blooms off only, or you can decide to prune them if they're out of control. But it is important to know, and I just recently learned this when I was doing some research about hydrangeas, you don't actually have to prune a hydrangea, but it is important to deadhead hydrangeas so you can promote reblooms and some regrowth if you like. And you also have to prune the dead out of your hydrangeas also. So hydrangeas are very classic in your garden. I feel like everybody needs a hydrangea in their garden, and I do love the mass planting look. As you can see that I have mass planting here in my hydrangea garden. Those blooms in the summertime are absolutely gorgeous, and they just keep giving all year long. So now that I've already talked about what time of year to prune your hydrangeas, I'm going to tell you how to prune your hydrangeas. So like I said, you don't actually have to prune your hydrangeas at all. They will be perfectly fine if you do not want to prune your hydrangeas, but you do have to deadhead. And when you deadhead your hydrangeas, which these old spent blooms, and some people don't like to look at this at all into the garden, but for this year I decided to leave some of them. I had already deadheaded some, but left some as well. So when you deadhead a hydrangea, you're just going to take your pruners, which I have the Felco 2 pruners, and we're going to cut just slightly below the bloom right here. And this is what's left over. So this is called deadheading, when you remove a spent bloom from the plant and you dispose of that. Now, if I want to prune my hydrangea now, I can go ahead and do that now, or I could wait until I see these tiny little buds, which I'll just clip one off here to show you. When you wait for the springtime, these are the teeny tiny little buds right here. They're going to pop out, and that's how you can tell that your plant is alive and where you need to cut. Now that we've already talked about where the buds are, it is wintertime, so I'm not going to see any buds right now. So, but you can tell where they are a little bit swollen right there. So let me back up here. So if you just want to deadhead your hydrangeas, you can do that, and that would be all of your pruning, except if you have any kind of dead on your plant. And when you have dead on your plant, you'll probably know that during the growth season that it doesn't have any blooms on it and you just want to like cut all that out. So is deadheading right here, like so. Now if I wanted to prune my hydrangeas, I do not want to cut this plant all the way back. This is considered a shrub, by the way. I do not want to cut it back to the ground. If you cut it back to the ground, yes, it will be okay, and you will still get new growth, and you still will get new blooms because it grows on new wood. These panicle hydrangeas grow on new wood. And it's called a panicle because, let me get you a better bloom here, it actually looks like a panicle object. So that is why it's called panicle hydrangeas. So yes, I do like to prune my hydrangeas, actually. And if I want these limbs to be strong and to continue to get strong, I do not want to cut this plant all the way back. I don't want to cut it by half, so I only want to cut it by 1/3 each year. So you got to know like what size you want your hydrangeas to before you buy your plant, because they can range from 2 feet all the way to like 20 feet, way taller than me. So that's important, like what size hydrangea that you have. I chose the little lime hydrangea for my garden because I knew that these emerald green arborvitaes are going to get 13 to 14 feet tall max after 10 years or so. And I know that these hydrangeas are only going to grow 4 to 5 feet tall. So that, 4 to 5 feet tall is pretty tall to me. And if I wanted just a regular hydrangea, those could get up to 6 to 8 and even 10 feet tall. So that's crazy for me in this small little space that I have in my garden. And by the way, I garden in Charlotte, North Carolina. I am zone 8 as well. So this plant comes up to my hip, okay? So if I wanted to go halfway down, it's gonna be right to my knee, right? So that's halfway. I don't want to go halfway. I only want to go like 1/3, which means I'm not really going to be cutting that much off. So I say maybe 1/3. It's going to be probably about this much or so. Like I said, there's no science to it. If you cut more, it's no big deal. It's okay. Just kind of giving you a reference. So anyways, about 1/3. Now most of you, or some of you, have new gardens and you're gardening for maybe the first time. So I have some plant stands. I purchased a plant stand from Gardener Supply to help these blooms stay upright. So when they start to growing, they're like beautiful and they're like upright, but then when you get like all the blooms on it, they become heavy and then they start drooping over. And everybody's like, I don't want them drooping over. I don't want them laying on the sod or over into the garden. And I want to be able to see like other things underneath my hydrangeas like I do, because I like layers of 3. I've got my emerald green arborvitaes that are 1 layer, then I have my hydrangeas that are the 2nd layer, and then I have another layer on the ground, which I'll share with you in just a little bit. But my main focus right now is the lemon coral sedum. And then sometimes I'll throw some super petunias under there. I have some salvia, and then I also throw some super petunias in this garden as well, because I like lots of contrast and lots of color in my garden. So for me, these helped for the first 2, I'm gonna say the first year, 2nd year. Now that these hydrangeas have been in my garden for 3 years, I may not need them as much this year, but we'll see, because these blooms do get really big and they're really gorgeous, and when it does rain, they will flop on you. So that's another reason why you only want to cut these down by 1/3. You want these stems to be really, really strong to be able to hold your hydrangeas upright. Now, mine are not the new improved. What is that? There's a new improved hydrangea that stands more upright, but it does get a little bit taller, and I'll throw the, I think it's called improved prime time. primetime hydrangea. I'll throw the name up for you, but there is a new improved hydrangea that gets a little bit taller than these, and they do stand upright more and are more of a sturdy stem, but they weren't out when I got mine, so go figure. So okay, I have my hydrangea in the ground. Now, how do I take care of these hydrangeas? I already told you that they need water. They need lots of water. So either you're going to water them by hand, and do not spray them with your sprinkler. You're going to have to water them at the base of the plant for them to be happy. Or you're going to have drip. So my drip is underneath my mulch, so they're getting regular water every single day to make them happy. Now, I have them in the ground. I know how to water them. So when am I going to fertilize them? So you need to at least fertilize these at least one time a year. I like to personally fertilize my hydrangeas with Espoma products, and I like to use Rose Tone personally. Now, if you don't have Rose Tone and you have Plant Tone, then that is perfectly fine. Any kind of fertilizer is better than nothing. So I fertilize almost everything here in my zone, Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm going to say late March, early April. But that's when my temperatures are starting to get higher up into the 60s, 70s, and everything's starting to wake up, and all the buds are starting to form onto the shrubs and everything. And so I give everything in the garden a dose of some type of fertilizer, and I like to use Espoma products. And I'll have another video out about that later when I actually do start fertilizing all my plants in the garden. And people will come over here to the backyard and they're like, oh my gosh, like everything looks just so gorgeous and green and so vibrant in the garden. And that's because I do fertilize every single year, at least once a year. Now, I'm a little crazy and I like blooms, and blooms need extra food, right? So I do fertilize my hydrangeas more than once a year. So I'm going to say maybe I'll do maybe March, April, and then maybe another one June and July. Now you want to stop fertilizing like in August, because you want these plants to start being able to like prepare for wintertime, and you don't want to be pushing a lot of growth onto your shrubs past August. So now we're going to talk about different common types of hydrangeas. We already talked about the big leaf hydrangea, which is the mop head, and those grow on old wood, so you prune those after they bloom in the summertime only. So after they bloom and then the blooms go away, you can either deadhead them or you can prune them back at that time. Do not prune them in the fall or in the winter or the spring, because you will cut all your flowers off. And that's about the only one that I can see on my list that you need to worry about that grows on old wood. So what I have in my garden is the panicle hydrangeas. They have the panicle shape. They have white, big, gorgeous flowers. They grow on new wood. So you can either prune them in the wintertime, which is now, or you can prune them when they start to sprout new foliage. All right, the third common type of hydrangea is called an oak leaf. They have a cone shape. So the third most common type of hydrangea is called the oak leaf. They have a cone-shaped white flower, and they grow on old wood, actually. So that's another one that you have to worry about pruning after they bloom in the summertime. Oak leaf and the big leaf hydrangea. And then another type of hydrangea is called the Annabelle. They have a globe-shaped bloom. They grow on new wood, and the Annabelle, this is the one that you can do the most severe pruning. In my notes that I read and research, it says that you can prune these back to just 12 inches from the ground. And then there's reblooming hydrangea, which is another one called, that's most popular, is Endless Summer, and they grow on old and new wood. So it really doesn't matter, since it grows on both, what time of year that you want to do those. Like I said, you don't have to prune at all, but you do have to deadhead in order to encourage new blooms, and we all want new blooms. So one really good thing about hydrangeas is they are deer resistant, but my deer did eat the new growth, so be careful if deer are hungry. they are going to eat anything. So I will continue to spray mine with deer resistant, and I'll throw the product that I particularly like the best that I have found this past year, and another subscriber had told me about it and it worked great towards the end of the season. But they will eat your new growth. So for the most part, hydrangeas are pest resistant, but I do go ahead and preventively spray for powdery mildew. So I'll put some like neem oil on for that. And another thing that we have to watch for is rust or leaf spot. So I'll spray some fungicide for that, and I'll throw the products up there, that the 2 type products that I like personally most for that. So wow, that was a lot of information, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye friends.